Good night and welcome to another episode of Tuesday Night Bible Study. I am Janil Jermaine Alcock, and we are going through Daniel through the month of March 2026, and we are seeing some things that are enlightening our vision, that are allowing us to see more about some things that were happening to this man who was a leader during the Neo-Babylonian kingdom, and of course, going through spaces that interloped or interspaced or intersected other kingdoms during that time period. This man was in the part of the Bible that is like the split or the part between the major and the minor prophets. And one of the things about him is that he 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 was different. He transcended the things that were around him. And as we go through this Lenten period and try to find ways to figure out how we also can do things similar to how he did, let us see how he dealt with being gifted in dreams and visions. And what he did do was at least record it so that we could see the possibilities of things that are around. So he was around in a time when Jehoiakim was king in Judah, Jerusalem. And then Nebuchadnezzar and his kingdom came in and changed the empire, changed the state of what was there. And then following that, the Medes and the Persians came and then took over that kingdom. In between that time period, as we would have seen from last week's study, one of Nebuchadnezzar's relatives there, Belshazzar, took the kingdom of Babylon and was reigning for a period of time. However, because of the surrounding eras or seasons, he was starting to gain some insight about some things. He was starting to get visions and even see messengers and hear some things that allowed him to not just navigate the visions that we saw and discussed in the last two sessions. One, in chapter 2, about the statue of gold, which showed different kingdoms. You'll actually see reflective vision that he had. That one was from Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2. This one in chapter 7 is him having a vision, but it's his interpretation of what those same kingdoms represented. We'll talk about it soon. And then in subsequent chapters, by chapter 6, we see him interpreting another vision from Nebuchadnezzar. So he could interpret the visions and he had wisdom. But now we see where he also was having visions and dreams and then presenting or showing some things, or a messenger, or even maybe God's inspiration, letting him know some things about what they represented and what they meant. He was going through some changing times and some troubling seasons. And many times when you go through the same thing, and this is the period where we are fasting, reflecting, trying to figure out how to change and become better, doing things in more disciplined and self-control and patient fashions, and having ways where we see ourselves as people of God. And so this is an instructive way where we can move to see things that God is revealing to us. Now, your gift may not be dreams and visions. Your gift may not be an understanding of how to interpret things that are deep. But whatever it is, at least approach it with the diligence that Daniel did. You will see in chapter 5, as we read last week, that even in the seasons where others were doing other things and they gave laws that would have prevented him from doing something that was godly, which was prayer and worshiping Yahweh, that he still went and did what was right anyways. Will it be that you will have enough integrity and enough moral restraint and enough courage to do what is right in the seasons and the places you are, so that your gift In his case, it was dreams, interpretation, wisdom, administration, leadership, so that your gift, whether it's singing, whether it is pastorship, whether it is being a good legal type person, whether it is being a good accounting type person, whether it is being a good medical person, whether it is being a policeman, soldier, officer, teacher, somebody who helps wherever in whatever season or wherever you are, to push through it, being guided by God to do what those imaginations, because it's the same thing, His was very grandiose and dreamy, airy-fairy, and visionary, and giving insight as well as foresight. But whatever imagination you get from God, whatever vision of who you can be and where you can go, either for yourself or where you are, for him, it was a wide scope thing in relation to multiple kingdoms and where they were currently, as well as what could happen in the future. But for you, it could be something simple as to how you can do some good things in your family to then move forward and do things in the full escape of where you are. Take it by how Daniel did it. Examine where you are and what is good, and then be guided by God to move forward with great alacrity, speed, wisdom, and knowledge. Now, in chapter 7 of Daniel, which is where we're going to go tonight, chapter 7 and chapter 8, we see where he has visions of four beasts: a lion with eagle's wings, a bear that had a rib kind of in his mouth, a leopard which was having different structures also, and this beast which is being described as being terrifying and having 10 horns, but also having iron-based teeth. And interestingly, this has been studied so much that even the Amplified, which we will reflect on multiple times tonight, as well as the NIV, gives breakdowns of some of the things in relation to what they mean. But before we get there, I want to also show you that these things are not just for those time periods. Yes? So he saw things in relation to kingdoms in that time period. But the beasts of these nations, and really any nation around the world, sometimes exert political power and try to push and do things where they are. But if there's no moral restraint, or if they're not grounded in God, then just like the vision he had, not him, but Nebuchadnezzar had, that he interpreted in chapter 2, they will all be toppled over or been some subdued or come eventually under the reign of Christ. And the lessons we will learn from chapter 7 to 8 of Daniel shows that human kingdoms are always and will be, yes, until Jesus comes, of course. And this prophet envisioned them as beasts that come out from different areas, but they were pagan, they were without morality, they were without the real God. Hence why they look terrifying and a little beastly. And then it is at the point when God's sovereign power comes in, or somebody trying to do a change, we'll read it, part of it in Daniel chapter 7. Then we see the fullness of what this earth should be like. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 27, it says, "Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven will be handed over to the holy people of the Most High." His kingdom, the Most High, is what is referenced as his. His kingdom, and this of course is God, will be an everlasting kingdom, meaning it will last forever, it will be forever. And all rulers will worship and obey him. We will discuss tonight how all the the references of these beasts and these kingdoms, or the rulers of them, or the attempt at leadership and trying to do things, are so sinful that they become the representation of what we in the Christendom love to call the Antichrist. Anything that opposes Christ. The Apostle John refers to anything that doesn't love or doesn't obey the real God as anti or opposing of Christ, Antichrist. And he said that it is in the world and always going out in it and already is here. So what we will read are like the foreshadows or the representations then of evil, or representative kingdoms with rulers who do things opposing what is right and then pushing out right across history until, of course, the real ruler, the real king comes, who is Christ. And he won't just come for a season or do something and it kind of good, but there are a lot of bad. But he will reign with peace and equity, mercy, justice, the fullness of, of, of the greatness of his power. And it will last forever. It won't just last a little season here or there. It won't do things that are unseemly. And this is the point of Daniel's the visions in chapters 7 and 8. Note also that both chapters have kind of a similar vibe. First, he's in a vision or he's in a specific place, and then he dreams he's somewhere. And then it is that there's an interpretation of what it is he's seeing. Interestingly, chapter 7 has 27 or 26, 27, 28 verses, 28 verses. Chapter 8 has 27. So it's very parallel. And both show him having a vision, dreaming, and then trying to figure out what it is. And then either he gets insight into it, or a messenger comes and explains it to him, and there's more interpretation and understanding. And then at the end of both, and you will understand why when we read it, if you've not read it before, that he becomes kind of perturbed, disturbed in his countenance, and feeling almost sick in the way he was troubled by his thoughts. At the end, which is the 28th verse of Daniel 7, it says, "This is the end of the matter. I, Daniel, was deeply troubled by my thoughts, and my face turned pale, but I kept the matter to myself." In chapter 8, in the last verse of that chapter, verse 27, it says, "I, Daniel, was worn out. I lay exhausted for several days. Then I got up and went about the king's business. I was appalled by the vision. It was beyond understanding." And you also must do the same. You will feel weird when things come to you that are terrifying or weird. Or in the case of this, if you're a prophet or somebody who sees things or starts to understand things more than others, it may make you exhausted or tired. We see in the Bible that there are many people, for example, Jeremiah, who lamented over the upcoming stress that Israel will go through, or Isaiah, or Elijah, who had his despairing phases, that this sort of thing can get tiring. So you, as a child of God, must find ways where you take the rest period. And as you could see, it says that he was exhausted and he lay down, rested. Then he got up and went about the normal business of the things he had to do. You cannot in this life allow the world around you to bombard in without remembering that God is in charge. Some things will go unseemly and things around you will look weird, but you have to remember that these things are so that the ending and the destiny of him who must be, must be. And it is in the times and the seasons we will read that, as in chapter 7, The first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had this dream. It passed through his mind as he was lying in the bed, and then he wrote it down. So the first thing you have to realize, as you can write down your dreams, and then you maybe remember some of the substance of it. As you can see, it's very detailed, obviously because he wrote it down. And also, you will see that the, the imagery in it was terrifying enough. So he needed to try to get an understanding of where it was and what it was about. And so he goes into this dream phase. Oh, Jesus, this is one of the most fascinating parts of the Bible. And it says, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. I'm reading from the Amplified. The nations and four. So it's like he's in a dream phase, lying down, and then it's like a wind type thing was going on over a sea. And then out of the sea, these beasts come up. But each of them coming up were a representation of the different nations and the different kingdoms that were to be. Of course, we already know what they are from Nebuchadnezzar's dream in chapter 2. The same Babylonia, the same Medo-Persian Empire, Greece and Rome. But this now is Daniel's understanding of what it meant based off him having a vision or a spiritual insight from God. And by the time it reaches verse 4, it says the first, and in the Amplified, it actually starts to explain it and give some exploration. The Babylonian Empire under Nebuchadnezzar was like a lion and had wings of an eagle. And then it said a second one by the time it reaches verse 4. The Medo-Persian Empire was like a bear, and it was raised up on one side, and there were ribs that were in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, arise, devour much meat. And then he saw another one like a leopard. But this now describes the Greek empire of Alexander the Great. And it had on its back four wings like those of a bird. The beast also had four heads. And these were the generals or the successors that would come from that same Greek empire. Yes? The successors, please note that in the document center, you will see all sorts of links and notes at the bottom. If you scroll down to the note that says Daniel chapter 7, a survey of 5 world kingdoms. Let me just double check to see if that's the one. Or rather, Daniel 8. Yes, Daniel 7, a survey of 5 world kingdoms. You will see that it actually starts to reference and show who those rulers were. So, but just for the sake of those who are on, let me just make sure that we read and see who those were. Those were, of course, one second. Cassander, who was ruling over Greece at the time and its regions, Lysimachus, who was ruling over Asia Minor, Seleucus, who was ruling over Syria and Israel's land at the time, and Ptolemy, who was ruling over Egypt. Now, those four, Cassander, Lysimachus, Seleucus, and Ptolemy, in history we'll know, took over other regions after Alexander did his thing. And it is the one who is called Seleucus, whose empire went on and on and on over time to create a man called Antiochus IV, who was represented, and we see some discussions exactly about who he was to, who was like a foreshadow or a foretaste of what an antichrist type person would be as a ruler. We'll get to it in a minute. But while he's having these visions and he's seeing these things, he also sees that there's a horn coming out of this fourth beast, the one that had the 10 horns and the iron teeth. And that one had this little horn that just pop up and take over three of the first horns. And history shows that this same Antiochus was one of the main ones out of the three or four that took over from Alexander the Great or the Seleucus Empire and then started to become a boasting figure, a kind of pagan, evil person. We'll get to that in a minute. But it is all showing a foreshadow of who the actual Antichrist would be. He similarly will boast and act as if he is God. He similarly will do some things to try to change around some things and persecute people, such as the Jews and the Christians. He also will do some things to try to stop the worship of those who worship the true God. He will also do some things to make war against people and try to overwhelm them and overpower them. He also will be one who looks as if he is kind of helping, but he actually will put things down and worship as if he is the one who is God. His latter part of his name, Epiphanes, Antiochus 4, actually means kind of a deifying term, which means almost as if he is God. Of course, he was not God. In the Greek, it is illustrious term, meaning alluding to a deity. And it is fascinating how this plays out. But before it plays out, which is where I'm excited, Daniel has this weird vision, similar to how Nebuchadnezzar has his vision, and it all outlays itself for him so that we have it written down and we can reflect back and see that God is really the one who's in charge. None of those. And so by the time it reaches verse 9, it now shifts. So it shifts from showing you these nations and these kingdoms and the things that are happening to show you who the Ancient of Days is, who is God. Seated on the throne, his garment was white as snow, it says in verse 9, and hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was flames of fire, and its wheels was a burning fire. You can see references to this wheel of burning fire in Ezekiel 1, verses 26 to 28, and all sorts of other references throughout the Bible that shows this Ancient of Day on a throne scene in a throne room, a courtroom, yes, and where he rules, and there's angels and all sort of angelic presence around him, and a reverence type vibe, and all sort of light. It says a river of fire was flowing and coming out from before him, and thousands were attending to him, and 10,000 times 10,000 were standing before him. The court was seated, and the books were open. These books, you can make further references in the Bible, could be the books of remembrance, rather, or the Lamb's book of life. Then it said in verse 11, I kept looking because of the sound of the great and boastful words which the horn was speaking. So remember, we have the lion with the eagle's wings, we have the bear, we have the leopard, and then we have this other beast, we have iron teeth, and then a kind of a horn that comes out and then takes over three other horns. But out of the horn itself, it's like it was speaking things or doing things boastfully. I kept looking until the beast was slain, and its body destroyed and given to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their power was taken away, yet their lives were prolonged, for the length of their lives was fixed for a predetermined time. So When we're doing and looking at some of these dream imagery, you have to understand that many times it's not talking about one thing. Also, it's not also usually talking about one time period. And so it shifts from showing you some of the things in relation to these empires that are coming through the time he was until a few centuries after. And then it shows a courtroom scene of the God of the earth, the Ancient of Days, yes? And then it shifts now to start to show you some things about how this last beast will actually be a representation of another one to come, the Antichrist in the end, who God himself will be the one to come and destroy, burning fire. But the time seasons of the others will be before God comes. So they have their time when they will die and then they will go to the judgment. But this one will be there at the point when Jesus comes back and he will take care of him himself. Now, the Son of Man starts to be represented in Daniel chapter 7, verse 13, where it says, he kept looking in the vision, and then it was that on the clouds of heaven, one like a Son of Man in the Aramaic, which is this section of Daniel, is written in Aramaic. It says Barinash, yes, and it says he came up to the Ancient of Days. So it's obvious that these are two different people. So it's not the same Ancient of Days, and then the, he's the Son of Man and coming up to himself or so. It's two separate persons. But by our understanding, we will see in verse 14 it says, and to him, meaning to the Son of Man, in reference in the Amplified, it says, the Messiah was given dominion and supreme authority. And so, Father, Ancient of Days, Son, the Son of Man or the Messiah, and the fullness of the kingdom now and its glory, that all of the people and the nations and the speakers of every language should serve and worship him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion and will never pass away, and his kingdom is one that will not be destroyed. By the time it reaches verse 15, before we transition into further interpretations, it said that he was distressed, meaning Daniel, and anxious, and the visions, alarmed and agitated him. And because he's in this dream, a kind of lucid phase, he could move and he could do things in there. It said he approached one of those who stood by. So there were others standing by him, probably having visions too, or maybe somebody within the heavenly realms there watching the things in the throne room scene. And so he began to ask him to explain things to him. And so he told me and explained to me the interpretation of things. These four great beasts are four kings. So if it is that the Amplified never explained, just as I did each of the kingdoms, or I and many other commentaries you see, don't compare it to Daniel chapter 2 and other things in Revelation, and some of the things you will even say Jesus himself say in Matthew 24, it actually interprets it and tells you what it is. These four great beasts, this is verse 17 of chapter 7, are four kings who will arise from the earth. But the saints or believers of the Most High will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, for all ages to come. And because we must die, and we are earthly, our bodies are decaying, it obviously is referencing a time different from our current era of this physical, this corruptible, this mortality. So whoever this Messiah is, whoever this Son of Man, this Bar Inosh, this person who comes up to the Ancient of Days and is coming out of the clouds of heaven, and everything will be given to him to have dominion over, he must be in a state or a stage where we also will join him in an eternal kingdom, both spirit and body. So it can't be this age. And it cannot be that when we're referencing and showing that the supposed anti, and we'll reference soon that one of them that they're referencing is somebody who would come soon after Daniel's time, that it was that alone that this chapter is about, or something physical, something in this mortal age. Be careful how you look and reference it. It is both to that time and for a period of time to come. Then I wish to know the exact meaning of the fourth beast. I'm pretty sure he would. He was the most terrifying and the weirdest out of all of them, which was different from all the others, extremely dreadful, with teeth of iron and claws of bronze, which devoured, crushed, and trampled down what was left with its feet, and the meaning of the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horns which came up later, and before which 3 of the horns fell, specifically that horn which had eyes and a mouth that boasted great things, and which looked larger than the others. As I kept looking, that horn was making war with the saints and the believers and overpowering them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the Most High. And the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. Thus the angel said, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which will be different from all other kingdoms, which will devour the whole earth, tread it down, and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them, and he will be different from the former ones, and he will subdue 3 kings. He will speak words against the Most High God, and wear down the saints of the Most High, and he will intend to change the times and the laws, and they will be given into his hand for a time, 2 times, and half a time. A time, 2 times, and half a time. So it's 3.5. In Revelation, we get the concurrent type of description. Revelation 13, verses 1 to 6, which shows that this Antichrist will have a period of about 7 years. The first 3 goes on wars and supposedly bring peace. Somewhere in the middle, he cuts off some things in relation to worship and some things that was happening. He also will be one who boasts himself and acts valiantly, but it's not really valiant, it's pride, and then say he is God and profane the area to be worshipped. Antiochus actually does the same. But the court of the Most High will sit in judgment, and his dominion will be taken away, first to be consumed gradually, and then to be destroyed forever. Then the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints and the believers of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all the dominions will serve and obey him. This is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my waking thoughts were extremely troubling and alarming, and my face grew pale, but I kept the matter of the vision and the angel's explanation to myself. A season, a time period, an era, a set of kingdoms, represented in Daniel's dream as different beasts coming up out of the sea, different nations with different kings. But then this latter one, similar to how there was this statue, had a gold section, a bronze section, or a silver section, a bronze section, an iron section with mingled with clay. The same last one, which is in that time period through the Greek and then the Roman Empire, which split up, that one still remains and then will morph into something weird that he calls 10 horns, and then one of the horns come up and that horn will take over 3 of the kingdoms, and then he will war and do some weird things. We see, quite frankly, that in our common period of time, and this is not to scare and this is not to make you worried too much, that the fulfillment of some of these things are going and taking its time little by little. Jesus says that you will never know the hour or the day, but you can see by the things that are happening. You can understand the seasons. And he explains some things, please read it in Matthew 24, and says these are the birth pangs or the birth pains, because it is at the time when the mother is about to deliver the earth, and all the manifestation of the saints will come, and some things will start to happen that shows that the fullness of this entire universe is about to birth the fullness of the coming of the destiny of the age of man. And by the time we reach Daniel chapter 8, he gets another vision, interestingly, because maybe God was supremely keen to make sure you understood, to then break down those last two, kingdoms even greater, the Greek and the Roman Empire. In this time, it was the third reign of Belshazzar. So 2 other years had passed. And he was in the capital area of Persia, which was called Susa at the time, in a specific province, so detail is in the province called Elam. And he saw himself in this kind of area called a Eula Canal. Yeah. And so he looked out, and then he raised his eyes up, and then he was somewhere in front of the canal, and he's seeing some things happening, and he sees this ram. So in this chapter, he sees a ram and then a goat. The ram would be a representation of the Medo-Persian Empire. The goat will be a representation of some things in relation to the kingdom of Greece. And the ram had two horns, which is a representation of the fact that one, and it is so detailed. It says one of the horns actually kind of higher or larger than the other. Because one of the kingdoms that amalgamated Medo-Persia, the Medians was a little bigger or are more powerful, had more resources than the Persians. Yes? And it says that one, this is how detailed it was, the one that was higher and more resource filled, or the larger horn, actually came up after the one that was the other smaller horn. And it gets more detailed by saying this ram started to charge from one side of the world in the east and move west, north, and south. And then it transitions by the time it reaches verse 5 and talks about a male goat. This is Greece now. And it says it's coming from the opposite side, from the west. And it rushes across the earth. And it comes upon the ram. And it charges at him in power and wrath. And he strikes the ram so that it had no more strength left. And then trampled on him. And there was no one who could rescue the ram from the paw of this great male goat. And then it said that the male goat magnified himself exceedingly. But somehow the horn on it was broken. And in its place, 4 prominent horns came up. So remember, we mentioned some things in relation to 4 beasts in the other one. And then at the end, there was some things happening on another horn. It's the same representation. I missed saying this, but in some of the interpretations from some of the theologians, it said in the Romish era, in the Greek Roman Empire, that era had 10 main hills in some of the surrounding region, which could be a representation of what the 10 horns means. But it also could mean that in the future, there are 10 main kings or rulers of different kingdoms, and then one of them comes up and then takes over 3, so that there are eventually 7. In this chapter 8, it is describing the actual 4 that are taken over by the 1. In this reference, because we're talking about Greece, it is the same leaders we mentioned earlier. Yes? So out of one of them came forth a rather small horn, but one of irreverent presumption and profane pride, which grew exceedingly powerful towards the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. Very direct, very detailed. And this, of course, is where the Antiochus for Epiphanes was ruling in the same regions from Syria across into Israel. And so he now decided he was going to become equal with the commander of the hosts of heaven, and took away from him the daily sacrifice. And the place of his sanctuary was thrown down and profaned. Because of this transgression, the host will be given over to the wicked horn along with the regular sacrifice. and righteousness and truth will be flung to the ground, and the horn will be do as it pleases and prosper. And then he said, Daniel, that he heard a holy one, meaning an angel speaking, and another holy one said to the one who was speaking, how much time will be required to complete the vision regarding the regular sacrifice, the transgression that brings horror, and the trampling underfoot of both the sanctuary and the host of the people? In that verse 13 of Daniel chapter 8, I wanted to see that it gives this term called the rebellion that causes desolation. There are other references both in the same book as well as in Matthew 24, which I keep referencing. Please go and read it, where Jesus calls this the abomination that causes desolation, which is where somebody goes in, acts as if he's God, profanes the temple. And in the case of Antiochus, the fourth Epiphanes, we read in history that he took some pig, slaughtered it in the temple, acted as if he was going to be the great one. Wow. Stopped some of the Jewish practices, stopped their sacrifices, warred some other persons, and profaned everything in relation to the religious things in relation to Yahweh. And now the angel says to the other angel who was asking the questions, and Daniel is seeing the vision and seeing these things going around, and the angels are around probably viewing it, and then he's hearing what they're saying. So one of them says to the other, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be cleansed and properly restored. 2,300 evenings and mornings. The time for the sacrifices and the things in relation to worship was evening and morning. Divide that by 2. If it's one day, evening and morning, you get 1,150. Divide that by the number of things in relation to a day, and you actually get 3.5 years. And the 3.5 years is the same reference to the time period where this man was trying to do his thing, and then some things were restored through the Maccabees. If you have time, you can read the book of Maccabees. You can find it on the internet. It's not in our Reformed canon, but it is in some other Bibles. And he brought some things into some revival and trying to restore some things in relation to the Jewish tradition. But you must know that it is the foretaste or the reference of how 3.5 years will come, and then another 3.5 at the same Antichrist. It will come in the future. And then it is that after this profaning and this abomination that causes desolation, that God himself will be the one to come. Because of how wicked he is, it is God himself who has to come to stop him, to stop one of these kings and these rulers who are trying to behave as if it is him. So the Antichrist spirit, this warring, on evil, unsure, kind of proud, boasting type vibe, said the Apostle John, is out there all the time. And little by little, it is revealing itself to us that even in Daniel's vision, we see all the kingdoms coming in similar type of reference until one picks himself up in one way. And we see others coming in similar fashion, like a Nero from the same Greek and Roman Empire, interestingly. And then later in our own last century, Hitler, warring against the saints, warring to do things to be proud, trying to stop people from doing things in relation to living for God, acting as if they're the big person, trying to make it seem as if you must worship them or be led by them, profaning the things of God. So it said, and this, of course, shows you that it's not specific to the Antiochus 4 Epiphanies in verse 17 of Daniel 8, because it said, so the angel came near where Daniel was standing, and when he came, Daniel was frightened and fell down on his face. And then the angel said to him, understand, son of man, that the fulfillment of the vision pertains to events that will occur in the time of the end. We didn't end during the time of Nero. We didn't end during the time of Hitler. We didn't end in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. These are just the foretastes of the things to come to show who the real fulfillment of sin will be. Yes. Now and it was actually Gabriel, the messenger, one of the messenger angels who was speaking to him, say, was speaking with me, and then Daniel drifted off in a sleep again, and then the angel said to him, behold, I am going to let you know what will happen during the final time of the indignation and wrath of God upon the ungodly. For it concerns the appointed time of the end. And and without you getting excited and worried, it actually explains everything that I just explained above in verses 1 to 18, 19. The ram which you saw with the two horns represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy, rough-coated male goat represents the kingdom of Greece, and the great horn between his eyes is the first king. Regarding the shattered horn and the four others that arose in its place, four kingdoms will arise from his nation, although not with the same power and heritage. And then it says, and this is where you need to see and understand, that it's not about that time period. At the latter period of his reign, when the transgressors have finished, a king will arise. So it's not saying people and the things that we're talking about. Something in the future, something deadly and ridiculous. A king will arise, insolent and skilled in intrigue and cunning. His power will be mighty, not by his own power, and he will corrupt and destroy in an astonishing manner. And he will prosper and do exactly as he will. He will or shall corrupt and destroy mighty men and the holy people. And through his shrewdness, he will cause deceit to succeed by his hand. He will magnify himself in his mind. He will corrupt and destroy many who enjoy a false sense of security. He will also stand up and oppose the Prince of Princes. That, of course, is Jesus Christ, the Messiah. But he will be broken. And this is where you need to see and understand. It is not us who eventually do the goodness to stop all the messes of this world. Yes, we can help and we can do our best to be at peace and to try to secure ourselves and to love each other and do some things in community. But it says, but he will be broken, and that by no human hand. In parentheses in the Amplified, it actually says, but by the hand of God. The vision of the evenings and the mornings which had been told to you is true. It is the same Gabriel, the messenger, still speaking to Daniel. But keep the vision a secret, for it has to do with many days in the now distant future. In the NIV, that section which I'm reading, which is verse 26, says, the vision of the evenings and the mornings that has been given to you is true. But seal up the vision, for it concerns the distant future. And I, Daniel, was exhausted and sick for several days. Afterward, I got up and continued with the king's business. But I was astounded at the vision, and there was no one who could explain it. And who could? Because in his day, all these other things have happened since then. In Daniel's time, the Neo-Babylonian kingdom, 500 and odd BC. How much time has passed since then? 2,500 and odd years. So him seeing these things, how could it explain to him? The angel and some of the other things happening around him gave him the reference for the kingdoms. We saw it. And then it said Media, Persia, and Greece. And then other things about somebody else coming, which was near to where his time period was. But then all of this thing about profaning things, and then the Son of Man coming with the Ancient of Days, and then he himself, has to break this issue because he's gonna see somebody who's opposing the Prince of Prince. Who could understand it or explain it? the kingdoms of God, or rather, the kingdoms of this world, will push and do what it must, and by its own might or pride. But in the end, the everlasting kingdom will come. There is no stopping it, there is no going around it. There's no other person but this Messiah. I know this discussion was supremely deep, but there are some references in that text that was sent to you. Please check it in the group. Please check it in emails if they're there. And also read some of the references I mentioned from Revelation, from Matthew chapter 24, and so forth. And also take up maybe a concordance and a Bible to look through it. And also rewatch this episode. Also, other versions of the Bible, like the one I was reading, the Amplified, shows things that the KJV or the NIV doesn't necessarily say. And I was actually quoting and saying it as we were reading along. The things will come, but it is God who will defeat evil in its end. History will show the man doing his thing, or kingdoms trying to do things in an anti-way opposing Christ. But nothing and no one can stop the everlasting kingdom. And so we must continue to worship him, obey him, and do some of the things that he has said we can do. And by the fullness and his grace, we will eventually see the 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 I can't even describe the adulation of the things that Daniel is trying to also explain, and he couldn't really explain it. Let us be grateful that there's a God who shows us these things and makes us understand more about where we are, what's happening around us, what is to come, and then also about his love. Let us see that the fullness of God can be revealed through us. His nation, his kingdom will be the great one. And let us pray for his kingdom to come on earth. Lord Jesus, you are an everlasting one, the Son of Man. Thank you that you are a Messiah who died on our behalf, and that your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And there are times when we worry or get concerned because of the stresses of the day. We worry even by the readings of the things about the old kingdoms and how they will project themselves into the future. We read and see about the wars and the stresses, and how the very nature of man is so corrupt and terrifyingly sinful that they oppose you and what you represent. But help us, God, even as we go through the tribulations and the stresses, even as we worry about the lions and the leopards and the bears and the beasts with the 10 horns and the rams and the male goats and all of the things that crush against each other and forget you, and then also try to profane and do their own thing out of their own pride, that you are king, and it is your justice and it is your truth that will eventually prevail. Thank you, God, for everything and who you are. Amen. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Please do check it out next week when we go into chapters 9 and 10. It also has a lot of dream imagery about some other things. You read ahead also and check out some of the things that are pinging around in the groups and how we are discussing these topics from Daniel as we go into the Lenten period. Because sometimes also when you go in there, you get visions and imaginations, some things, and trying to understand and trying to figure out what they mean. Use the same Bible to help you to grasp who you are and where you are going. And know that in the end, that whatever terrifying thing may be around you or whatever God is trying to reveal to you, just like Daniel, it is showing you that these things must go and fade away into the fullness of the Messiah and his eternal kingdom. Blessings. Talk to you soon.